The question is, why do some people get addicted and not others? And it's also about, I mean, I was in a group session with someone, with a group of people last week, and the one guy was saying, like, I was used to cut buttons and things like that, and one day I decided to stop, so I just stopped. So some people can weigh up the positives and negatives and just stop, and other people can decide to stop, but then when they try, they find they can't stop. And the other thing is, what's fine for you may not be fine for me. Each of us have our own definition of what accepted drug and alcohol use is. So for some people, if I hold down my 9 to 5, Monday to Friday job, it's acceptable for me to get drunk over the weekend, or I only get drunk occasionally, maybe once a month, and that's okay. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If you're getting drunk and beating up your wife once a month, then it isn't. So there are lots of different nuances and factors involved around this. But in essence, it boils down to this. It boils down to taking this, which is, we call it the decision balance sheet. It's a good tool to use in other decision-making processes as well. And you sit down quietly with yourself, okay, and you say, okay, my current drinking pattern or drug use or porn viewing or gambling or whatever, which you think may be impacting on your life. Often it's getting in the way of you being the person you wanted to be, or reaching your full potential. And then you decide, look, maybe I should do something about it. So you take this decision balance sheet and you sit with yourself quietly and try and honestly reflect on, if I don't change, if I continue drinking the way I'm drinking, what would be the advantages of doing that? Like, wow, Friday night I'm with my friends, I socialize, I feel good on a Friday night when I drink, that kind of stuff. And if you don't change and you continue to drink the way you do, what are the disadvantages? Well, I binge on Friday night, and then Saturday I'm hungover, and I'm too hungover to spend time with my family or whatever, or I'm hungover, so I play soccer really badly on Saturdays. So that's part of the disadvantages. And then you think to yourself, okay, if I change, if I stop drinking, or if I only drink a maximum of 2 glasses of wine on a Friday night, or if I, whatever your change is if you implement that change, what would be the disadvantages? Well, for an adolescent, it could be, I may be risking being kicked out the group. I've been in the same group since grade 1. And we all smoke dope. We all smoke dachas. If I decide to stop, then, they may kick me out the group. So you look at that stuff, and then you look at, if I did change, what would be the advantages? Well, I'm very focused on my soccer, and it would mean I'd be a better soccer player. It would mean my relationship with my mother would be better. It would mean over time I would get better marks. It would mean that I may be able to make friends with, I now would have the option of making friends with other people. It would mean whatever it is. And it's quite a good idea to do it in this sequence. So you finish up with positives, the advantages. And in essence, each and every single one of us are faced with this decision and this balance sheet when it comes to drug and alcohol use. The problem is that some people can decide that they want to change, and they can just change and implement that change, whereas others can't. Others can make a commitment to change. I will only drink 2 beers or never drink anymore. And then they wake up somewhere where they don't know they are, naked in bed with someone or something like that. They have the commitment, but they don't have the tools. They don't have, and those people need to seek help to get tools. And that's essentially what rehab does, is that it provides you with the tools and knowledge which will make it easier to reach your goals, what you want. So I don't want to use alcohol anymore. I make that commitment, but then I keep on relapsing. Go to rehab, go to AA, go to self-help groups, go wherever you can to get tools. It's like I want to plant an apple tree, so in future I can have apples, free apples. So I can dig a hole for the apple tree with my hands, and even if I'm really determined, I'll be able to dig that hole and plant an apple tree. But if I have a tool, if I have a spade, I can dig that hole faster. I can dig more than one hole. It's the same in rehab. If you get given tools, it speeds up the process. It allows you to reach more potential, and then reap benefits. But the trick is that you can be given a spade, but you still got to use the spade, which can be a challenge. Yeah. Also, if you want to intervene, if you want to make a difference in someone's life who you think may have a drug or alcohol problem, you would approach it differently depending at which stage the person is at. So if the kid is merely experimenting, you know, at the age of 18, they drank beer once, just once, and they arrived at soccer the next day hungover. You would intervene in that case differently compared to if it's a kid with severe addiction who is drunk at school every morning, he drinks before school or whatever. The way you intervene is different compared to where the kid is at. This is one of the problems with random hearing testing. You know, you can go into a school and test all the kids, and you know that about 1/3 of the males will test positive. Slightly lower for females, probably about 20%. But what does that mean? It doesn't give you useful information. Most of those kids testing positive will be fine. It won't have a significant impact on their academic, intellectual, and emotional development. If you go into that place and you say, you need to go to treatment, you need to go to inpatient rehab or whatever, you're doing more harm than good. You're doing more harm than the drug and alcohol is in that adolescent's life. So if, you know, a kid is playing soccer for the first team, doing well at school, and they happen to test positive for dacha, it's like you want to respond very differently in that kid's life compared to a kid who arrives at school with red eyes and showing symptoms of dacha use every single day. You want to respond differently. So for someone with severe addiction, your intervention could be something like sitting them down with the school principal, friends, family, everyone, and saying to the kid, we've got a place for you in inpatient rehab. Either you go, or if you stay, we'll kick you out of the school. You won't be welcome at home. I'll no longer be your friend, or that's a kind of structured intervention. It's just the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes intervention can do more harm than good. So, you know, where is this kid at? And what is the appropriate intervention? Most of the time is about facilitating where they're at. You go to where they're at and you try and help them with the decision-making process they do. You can't make the decision for them. We've already been through that, but you can help them make the decision. So you can, as a soccer coach, if your best player in the league final arrives hungover or drunk, you say, I'm sorry, you're not playing. You provide consequences. Often it's just about mirroring them. Often it's just about saying, I see you have you talk a lot about arguing with your parents. I was just wondering, do you think your drinking contributes to that? You're trying to facilitate their process. It's not about where you're at and where you want them to be at. It's not about you at all. It's about where they're at. And the responsibility to deal with their drug or alcohol use is not yours. Your responsibility is to communicate a message to the best of your ability. That's your responsibility. Your responsibility is not to ensure that that message is received by the kid and implemented. No one can do that. You're not God. You can't do that. You can just work at getting better and better at providing the message as accurately as possible and reflecting to them their own behavior, the consequences of their own drug and alcohol use, but that's it. The worst thing you can do is say things like drugs kill, or if you use drugs again, I'm going to kill you, or just say no, or I mean, really, it's not about that. And there's lots of evidence to say that scare tactics, if you take drugs, you'll be arrested. If you take drugs, you'll die, or whatever, actually results in an increase of drug use amongst adolescents, not a decrease.
Grant, I just have a question just on what happens when the parents and caregivers aren't available. Like, do you have advice around how to navigate the space with a learner who, you know, perhaps we can see that they're taking too many drugs or drinking or turning up drunk, and that kind of balance of sort of overstepping, and how, do you have any advice around how you can work with parents that aren't willing to work with you and support the child?
The child generally is much easier to work with than the parents. because often parents find it quite a, there are lots of attitudes parents can take. So often, I mean, your classic, so if parents have a drug and alcohol problem themselves, then they feel very insecure about it and that kind of stuff. Also, often parents take, I mean, in your classic response, your textbook response, normally you have something like a father who thinks that the way to deal with the situation is to take charge, to be a persecutor, to say, son, if you drink or drug again, I'm gonna beat you, I'm gonna whatever. And that doesn't help the situation. And often it's empty threats. And in your classic, we call that the persecutor role. And in your classic response is the opposite, which is the mother. You know, we all love to come across as loving and caring and understanding people. So, you know, we would often, the mother would do things like, say, if the kid's too hungover to go to school, the mother will phone and say, he's got flu today, so he can't make it. Or they protect the kid from the consequences of their behavior. And they will say things like, shame, you know, he's had a hard life. His father died when he was 3 or something. No one understands him like I understand him. And that behavior, although it looks like it's caring behavior, it's actually very selfish behavior. It makes the mother feel good. It makes her feel like she's a loving, caring person, but it's actually not in the best interest of the kid. And then, you know, those roles, persecutor, enabling, the mother, father there, what I've just described, those roles are in each and every one of us. You know, we all sometimes like go too far to being understanding and caring, or go too far and being persecutory and providing too many restrictions. The core, what you're aiming for, is to provide support for people who really want help, and to provide consequences for people who don't want help. But there are lots of gray areas, and it's a difficult thing. Parents, most rehab centers run programs for parents, so that parents can look at their own behavior and their own response to the person who's got a problem. And they can learn tools which can facilitate the process of the person getting well, or help the person get well, and avoid tools which makes the situation worse. You know, I mean, that's a day-long, half-day-long workshop.
Yeah,
but that's,
sure.
It's difficult to work with family. It's difficult, you know, we're living in a community where alcohol is advertised. There are lots of associations with alcohol. For example, I mean, this is a Castle Lager ad. I don't know if you can see my cursor, where it says aroma in front of a full glass of beer and therapy on an empty glass. It's saying alcohol is the equivalent of therapy. Alcohol is therapy. Don't go to a social worker or to a psychologist. Just buy a beer. That's all you need. I mean, for me, that's unacceptable. But we see this from when we're young, or we see parents dealing with challenges by drinking. We get the association that alcohol, the use of alcohol, is a way of dealing with our problems from a very, very young age. It's in our culture, it's in our adverts, it's in the way people speak, etc. Catch of the day that drinking makes you seem sexier to other people. It's all about sexuality. Pure revelation with Smirnoff. Drinking alcohol makes you cleverer. It makes you more creative. It makes you all these messages and associations with alcohol. This Castle Lager ad, the Friendship Brew. Oops, I can't see what it says, but I think it says, I don't remember what I did last night, but I remember who I did it with. So it's about the friendship beer, that alcohol is friendship. Don't worry about friends, just buy a 6-pack. They're your little friends. And I think in many ways, I think, you know, the act of opening a bottle of wine immediately makes people feel relaxed because that's what they've been taught. In reality, there's no scientific proof that drinking alcohol makes you feel relaxed. None, nothing, nada, no. But everyone takes it for granted as if it's a God-given fact. And I think for kids, you know, they're exposed to adverts like this. You know, at our age, they're exposed to adverts like this. They would see them 10 times a day on the way to school and back. They would see billboards. These days, it's on their phone. It's right there. It's these kind of messages. And I think it's just accepted. If you go to a grade 7 class and you say, why do people drink alcohol? They will say, to be sexier, to be cleverer, to be cool, not to look cool, but to actually be it. It's an identity you can get by buying that alcohol or drinking it or tapping that button or whatever. So it's not just the physical effects, it's the psychological effects of taking alcohol or doing something illegal, and it makes you feel special and like a rebel and that kind of stuff. It's those things. So if you're getting those things from outside the organization, if you're getting respect, if you're getting a sense of belonging, if you're getting a positive self-concept, if you're getting that from something else, like being a soccer player or something like that, then it's a protective factor. You're less likely to become addicted to drugs or alcohol. In fact, you know, the stats are clear that the biggest protective factor we know is that if an adolescent has at least one adult who cares about what happens in their life, preferably a parent or whatever, but it could be a teacher, soccer coach, or you guys. If there's just one person who cares about what happens in their lives, it's an enormous protective factor. It's the biggest protective factor we know, that they're less likely to develop a problem with drugs or alcohol. There's no guarantee. It's just that they're less likely. I just want to make, before I forget, in this journey as well, for some people, a journey to addiction can be very fast. So some kids will say, the first time I took a sip of beer, the first time, that was it. From that moment on, nothing else mattered. But for most people, it's quite a long journey, particularly with something like alcohol. And then they only start seeking help when they're 40 or 50 or whatever. So for some people, if they do get addicted, that journey can be very fast, or it can be a very slow process. Cool. Are there any other questions at this stage?
No, there is one. Just an organization based in Philippi East wondered of the possibility of you speaking to the learners and staff, but I thought we could share your contact details and then maybe people can contact you directly if they want any follow-up engagement. Would that be okay?
Yeah, look, we have limited resources, and particularly at the moment, there are things happening in the organization which may make it difficult, but they are, yeah, contact me and we can take it from there and see what's possible.
Great, thanks. Any other comments or questions in the pause? I think we're good. Continue.
Guys, if you don't speak, I'm going to speak. When, okay, we're not going to go, we're going to do that or that. I think we're going to do this. Okay. One of the questions is, why do some people become addicted and not others? And if they do become addicted, why do some people manage to recover? Some people manage to recover quite easily, whereas others really struggle. Why is it? It seems to be different for different people, and why? So if I go into a high school, I know that 10% of those kids will become addicted. But I don't know which. I don't know who's going to become addicted. If we did, it would be quite easy. We could pull them out when they're 12 and start dealing with them. So we do know some things, though. And it's an interplay between individual factors, the drug which people use, and environmental factors. So individual factors, there's a strong genetic component. So if anyone in your family has a problem with drug or alcohol abuse, if your aunt was an addict or your grandfather or whatever, then you are far more likely to become an addict or alcoholic than the average person. So, you know, if you have 100 kids and they all drink a beer or they all smoke a joint for the first time, they're not all taking the same risks. The risks are different for different people. And I think that's quite important for adolescents to know. You also look for people who don't drink at all in your family, because often some people realize early on in their development that they can't handle this alcohol thing, and then they choose not to drink. Okay. The age of first use, so the younger you are when you first start using drugs or alcohol, the more likely you are to become addicted. And that's just because, you know, you don't have a base to process it or go through it. Self-esteem, if you don't have if there aren't things in your life which make you feel positive about yourself, you're at a more risk. Personal reasons for use, if you're using drugs or alcohol to have fun, you're probably at a lower risk of developing a problem than if you're using it to cope with problems. Okay. And then neglect and trauma. Drug and alcohol abuse is very related to a lot of social ills, and there's a lot of sexual abuse, there's a lot of gender-based violence, both the perpetrator and the victim to deal with it. Yeah, so there's a lot of, there's often trauma involved in someone who develops a substance abuse problem, and it's a kind of self-medication. These are the primary risk factors on an individual level, but there are lots of others, and we don't know what they are. So this is just the beginning stage. It also depends on the drug which a person is taking. So a drug like alcohol, a drug like heroin, for example, or unga, is more addictive than a drug like alcohol. So if you take 100 people, they all smoke heroin or unga, more of them will become addicted than if those 100 people just drank a beer. Okay. The addictive property of dacha and alcohol is about the same. It's a quirk of fate that alcohol is legal and dacha is illegal. And it changes at times. Alcohol has been illegal. At times, heroin's been legal and advertised. My heroin is stronger than your heroin. So that changes all the time. But certainly some drugs are more addictive than other drugs. So the substance being used is an important factor. And then other factors are environmental factors. So the presence or absence of a mentor or someone who has an interest in your life. Effective schools, and by that I mean not only academically, but also socially in terms of sport, etc. Just that you have a potential for a successful future. You have potential for further education, that it's within your grasp. You have potential for employment. All of these kind of things. If they're not present, then the risk of developing a substance use disorder or addiction increases for adolescents in that community. Community norms and cultural norms around drug and alcohol use. I mean, you can think of community norms regarding Islam and Muslims compared to Bob Marley, and it's just different, and they'll be different. I mean, you almost have family norms and friendship group norms, and then wider community norms and wider South African norms. South Africa actually has a high rate of non-drinkers, but we have a very high rate of binge drinkers amongst people who do drink. So binge drinking is almost accepted in our communities. So whether the risk of whether or not someone's going to develop a drug or alcohol problem depends on these three things: individual factors, the actual drug being used, and environmental factors. We're almost finishing up now, though, or whatever, but I just want to say something else about this. Is just some examples. Like I got two examples. The one was, I'm sure you guys still remember Dr. Kumalo, who was an icon at Kaizer Chiefs. And I was in a group of very good soccer players, and we were paid to play soccer. It wasn't legal to be paid. So when you went to play, you left your shoes out in the changing room. And when you came back, there was some money in your shoes. And if you scored a goal, there'd be a bit more money in your shoes. And at the time, Dr. Kumalo we were, 14, 15, 16, that age. And at the time, Dr. Kumalo featured in Castle Lager adverts. And for us, if you asked us, can Dr. Kumalo drink 10 Castle Lagers on a Friday and play a good game of soccer on a Saturday? We wouldn't only say yes. We would say yes, but he plays well because he drinks. That's my positive factor. And if you got a younger kids like grade 7, and you ask them things like that based on adverts you see around you, they will give you answers like that. I've got another one. It's like, I don't know what ages you are, but I hope you know about Michael Schumacher. Okay. Michael Schumacher was the best Grand Prix driver in the world. He won the world driving champions, Grand Prix driving championships. I don't know how many times, 9, 10 times. He was just probably the best driver we've ever seen. And he famously never drank at all. And a reporter once asked him, Michael, why don't you drink? And his answer was, you know, if I have one beer on a Friday night, it probably wouldn't affect me much. I'd probably still be the best driver in the world, but I just wouldn't be quite as good as I would be if I didn't have one beer, just one even. So that's why I don't drink at all, so that I can be the best driver I can possibly be. But every time Michael Schumacher won a Grand Prix, he would stand on the podium in front of millions of people watching on TV, and he would celebrate with champagne. And so the message going out there is associating success with alcohol use. But in reality, Michael Schumacher didn't drink at all. But the message going out to people is exactly the opposite. And I think that kind of thing, you know, adolescents aren't looking for the feeling which drugging gets them or whatever.